Hello, friends and comrades. Welcome to the Midwestern Marks live stream. I'm here with my brother from another mother, Carlos Garrido. We're going to be talking about how charity works under capitalism a little bit today, using Mr. Beast and his famous giveaway videos. We're going to be talking about 9/11. Obviously, 2 days ago was I don't know what year anniversary of 9/11, like the 22nd or 23rd year anniversary of 9/11. We're going to be talking about Tower 7 and some of the research, scholarly, peer-reviewed research. So you can't take us down for talking about this, YouTube. We're going to be talking about some of the research that's come out about the towers since they were hit, since the terrorist attacks happened. We're going to be talking about that video that went viral recently of a capitalist saying that employees need to be grateful for their employers, not the other way around. And some other solid topics. So we'll jump right into it after our intro. All right, got people flooding into the stream already. What is up, everybody? Ross already with the 20 euro super sticker. What a way to start the stream. Thank you so much, Ross. Appreciate you always. Yeah. How's it going today, Carlos?
The official sugar daddy of the Midwestern Marx Institute. Thank you so much, Ross. It's going great. We just had our last class of the Marxism and the History of Western Philosophy course that I am teaching through the Institute's Marxism School. We literally just finished like 20 minutes ago. And it was great. We discussed in this last class the topic of prophylicity and applied it to our understanding of contemporary imperialist and capitalist propaganda. So it was very, very enjoyable to teach in an environment where, I can let myself go and not have to be restricted by, not being able to use Marxist terminology or bring it back to the class struggle as we've always done in this class. So expect a lot more classes from our institute in the near future. And this is something that I see us doing, insofar as we're in existence. We'll continue to do these very important, essential, and extremely developmental for our students, these classes.
Absolutely. And it sucks you got to censor yourself, like, even, when you're teaching regularly, like, just tell the administration it's not my fault reality is Marxist. I don't know if that'll work, but.
Well, it's not necessarily censored. Like, I always start with Socrates' apology, and I bring it back through to class struggle. And I have a distinctive Marxist interpretation of of Plato's Apology, which is his description of Socrates' trial when they find him guilty and sentence him to death. And so I provide a Marxist analysis there, but kind of how Parenti does in a lot of his, especially earlier books. I don't say it's a Marxist analysis, but it is effectively a Marxist. So I do that throughout, but I have to limit the words that I use. And then once we get to the sections on Marx Engels, Lenin, Mao, Che, um, and those are all the main figureheads that I use. Then we can start to use the concepts, and hopefully the wheels are turning by that point, and they're already thinking in line with that. But I'm not trying to indoctrinate anyone. So if anyone's out there watching, I'm just trying to teach philosophy and continue the tradition of critical thinking that is central to philosophy.
For sure. Thank you, Sebastian, for the $5 super chat. Have a great stream, y'all. Thank you. We definitely will, especially with the super chats rolling in like this. It's pretty awesome. Thank you to everyone. Of course, this is the way that we support our institute and our printing press and our classes and our streams and TikToks and all of the content that we do. It's all funded by the people, small dollar donations from you, the viewer. Got no outside sources or investors or funders. So means a lot when you can send, a $5 super chat. Obviously, not everybody can support financially. And of course, we understand that. But the way that you can help our stream, even if you can't support financially, but if you want to help boost us, is to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. So yeah, appreciate everybody who likes our content, who interacts with it, and boosts us in the algorithm as well. And yeah, have you watched House MD, ReZero Cult Leader? A little bit. I know there's commentary in it about the American healthcare system, but that's mostly the stuff I've seen about it. Because House is a medical doctor, right? That's probably what MD stands for, but I haven't watched it all the way through, but I heard it's a good show. And doesn't he get addicted to opiates as well? So maybe that's a show I should watch. Seems like there's a lot of crossover there. But thank you so much for the $6 super chat. Looks like Jacob had a question for you, Carlos. Says, I was reading a Stalin-era Soviet college textbook on Marxist philosophy earlier, and in the book, when it was criticizing Giovanni Gentile, the author called him a neo-Hegelian. Would it be possible for you to elaborate on that for a dumbass like me, please? Well, great question, Jacob, and it's a question that I'm glad you directed at Carlos because I have no idea. So maybe I'm a dumbass too, and I'm excited to learn from Carlos what a neo-Hegelian is.
No, I mean, Gentile is, I'm not super familiar with his work, but there's um, some leftovers of his work, some birthmarks, or in Gramsci, because he's very influential in Italy and in the development of Italian Marxism. But yeah, I couldn't say much on him. I could speak more about perhaps some of the other figures of Italian philosophy that were central. Um, Benedetto Croce was another one that was could be in some ways considered a neo-Hegelian, but the uh, the category of neo-Hegelianism is a little weird because I think that you have basically for me two periods of post-Hegelianism. You have the young Hegelians, the left Hegelians, and we just spoke with Professor Roland Bohr. Part of the conversation was the young Hegelian critique of Hegel, religion, etc. And then you have Marxism. And for me, I come from a tradition that sees Marxism as taking Hegel beyond Hegel, which is what Hegel would have done, or what the method would have entailed logically and practically had that method been sustained to the changing conditions that Marx and Engels are reacting to. So, um, yeah. So I guess as to the question, what they mean by neo-Hegelianism, um, my guess is that they're referring to anyone who is centering Hegel in a way that's non-Marxist. There's still some Hegelians out there. Not some. I mean, they're mostly scholars. A lot of them are good scholars. Um, a good number of them have sympathies for Marxism. People like Terry Pinkard have heard him describe himself uh, in a way that inverts what uh, a section of the Marxist tradition has done, which has considered itself Hegelian Marxist. That's a tradition that really sees Hegel as fundamental for Marxism. Terry Pinkert inverts that, and he calls himself a Marxist Hegelian. So he's a Hegelian primary, but who takes a lot of cues from Marx as well. But yeah, there's some Hegelians out there. There's one journal in the U.S. It's a Hegel journal. It's not very popular. It's called the Olive Minerva. I think they're publishing once a year. A lot of the stuff is on Hegel's views on religion. In Britain, surprisingly, Hegel is a little bigger, and the Hegel Society of Great Britain has a really good journal that's called the Hegel Bulletin, and that one's publishing quite consistently. I'm a very close follower of that journal. Yeah.
Well, there you go. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Someone just said they didn't start listening to Parenti till they saw our vid, so that's awesome. Always glad when we can introduce someone new to Parenti. Someone was saying too on the last stream, like they had read Parenti's books but hadn't heard his lectures. Like, his books are great. I'm reading Inventing Reality right now, but he's such a great speaker. It's just so fun to listen to. Actually, that's one of the topics that we have today is analyzing a video that breaks down the differences between manufacturing consent and inventing reality. I mean, it's not a great video. No offense. The guy who made it did a fine job. It's just he didn't say everything I would have said. So, we can delve into that later, though. Cheers from Brazil. Very cool. Shout out to our comrades all over the world. Where's everybody coming from today? Solidarity. Happy 65. Welcome back, Happy 65. Someone who's been a longtime viewer of the show, but who I haven't seen recently, who I know does a lot of intensive reading of theory and stuff. So they say my sociology professor, included a video of y'all in our assignments. It was dope seeing y'all. That's really cool. What video was it, Happy 65? I'm super interested in that. That's cool. I've been told that a few times that teachers or professors have used our content to teach stuff in class, and it's always like an honor, that we're putting together work that they feel is helpful in teaching an actual class.
Yeah, that's badass. Please do let us know what video it was, and yeah, I part of what the institute does is cast as wide a net as it can in the project of lifting people's consciousness and developing them. So we have TikToks and all these things, but we also have a lot of serious scholarly parts of the project which exists outside of the traditional structures of academia and outside of a lot of the limitations that exist within academia that force you, even if you're writing for like Marxist journals or whatever, to take a specific, distinctively Western Marxist, anti-actually existing socialism, purity fetish rooted line. So whenever we can see people from within the academy that share some of those critiques of the academy using our work, it's a tremendous honor. It's an important role, I think, in the struggle that the scholars and the intelligentsia plays in battling in the sphere of ideas. And we always welcome people that are within the academy, that feel homeless within the academy, that hold our views to engage with us. And our project, even though the main faces are Eddie, Noah, myself, and stuff in terms of streams, we have, I think, more than 60 contributors to the project, and a lot of them are professors from various places, a lot of organizers, graduate students. So yeah, if you have a professor who you think is ideologically in line with us and seems dissatisfied by the traditional structures of the academy, pitch them the institute. Maybe they can find a home here to publish their articles or scholarly work or to publish books.
Absolutely. I see Diego Rusarin brought me here. Awesome. Love Diego. I'm actually going on his show again on the 21st. I guess he's doing a new format now with some video reactions and stuff. I'm pumped. Not only pumped to get, some new attention on Midwestern Marx because Diego has such a giant audience, but also excited to talk to him because he's just a really nice dude. And when you talk to Diego, you can understand how he's attracted an audience of 1 million people. He's just really fun to listen to and really easy to talk to. So shout out to him and follow him, especially if you speak Spanish. Diego's great. I need a Marxist analysis of the Star Wars universe. I'm pretty sure that's been done. I'm pretty sure our friends at Left of the Projector podcast did that. But maybe that's something we can dive into at some point. Have you seen Star Wars, Carlos?
I have not. No Star Wars or Star Trek. No Harry Potter. I've been uncontaminated from a lot of the central points of bourgeois culture.
Well, you haven't read liberal theory then, because that's what Harry Potter is. It's theory for libs.
Yeah, it's not Locke or Rawls or
Right.
none, none of the key
J.K. Rowling. Well, it was until she went turf, and now now her theory's actually off limits for the libs. But Molly McGuire, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. I really should be finishing my reading for tomorrow night's class, but gotta support my comrades. Thank you. Working hard, Molly, watching the stream and preparing for tomorrow's class. Appreciate you, consistent viewer of the show.
We're hoping to do something. I don't know if a fundraiser or what, but Danny told us that the guest that he had for the Haiti class was kidnapped the day after. So that's just it's horrific. And we're still thinking what would be the best ways to help. Obviously, putting information out there, letting people know what's going on in Haiti, the systematic reasons why Haiti is the way that it is, and rooting those in imperialism and neocolonialism, and the strangling of this country that dared in 1804 to emancipate itself and had the first major slave rebellion revolution. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how the fuck we can help, because it's so hard to see a comrade that was willing to come on and speak to our students just get fucking kidnapped the day right after. So it's tragic, but the struggle continues, and we're gonna have to find ways to help in ways that we can.
Yeah, that's friggin' nuts. Solidarity with them for sure. And hope we can get that figured out or figure out a way to help. But I saw Happy 65. Oh, go ahead if you had a comment about that.
Sam says that Danny said that it was only hours after the. That's insane, man.
Wild. Totally nuts. I mean, like, the struggle is intense here in the U.S. Like, there is a ton of anti-communist repression, but if you think about places like Colombia or Haiti, where they don't Haiti, they don't even have like a real central government, really. It's just like gangs and warlords. And Colombia, there's just all these far right-wing paramilitaries and narco traffickers funded and propped up by the U.S., armed by the U.S., who will just kill people for being socialists. Like, when we talked to the Troika Collective about the Gustavo Petro election, they said just like door knocking and organizing for this candidate running democratically, you were at risk of getting shot. You're at risk of getting killed by these far right Colombian paramilitaries. So the struggle is a lot more violent in a lot of other places. So,
and now, unfortunately, this person who a lot of our comrades fought hard to bring into power is saying just ridiculous things, punching down against a country that is fighting tooth and nail against imperialism. Petro just came out partially in defense of Boric, criticizing Nicaragua. He called Nicaragua a banana dictatorship, if I'm correct. And it's so disgusting how these social democrats treat the projects that have emancipated themselves from the stranglehold of neocolonialism, imperialism, and from the things that they should be, working to emancipate themselves from, and that the people who worked with them to get them elected, like the grassroots at the grassroots level, that's what the people were hoping from them in many instances. So it's very sad, and it was a fair critique that Ortega waged. Why is specifically on the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the coup in Chile in 1973, which we just had a terrific conversation on in this Tuesday's episode of Capitalism's attack on the soul. Um, why is there so much state repression against the demonstrators? And that's not the first time. So that, of course, has to be criticized. How is someone going to bow in front of Allende and make this symbolic gesture when he gets elected and then rule in a way that's a lot more similar in some areas to Pinochet and the government that overthrew Allende than to Allende himself?
For those who don't know, they were tear gassing people at Allende's grave. Demonstrators who are literally at Allende's grave were getting tear gassed by the Boric government. Yeah, it's terrible to watch these social democratic candidates side with imperialism. The comments that Boric has made about Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba are disgusting. And then, he's condemning them as authoritarian, parroting the talking points of the U.S. State Department as he's tear gassing his own people. They're not calling you authoritarian, buddy. They're not calling for U.S. intervention or OAS to get all up involved in your country. So why are you calling for that against them? And for those who don't know, it's just them appealing the same way, like Bernie Sanders did in America, like abandoning socialist countries to appeal to liberals. Because there are a lot of upper middle class liberals in Latin America, and a lot of the anti-communist Red Scare propaganda that we got here in the U.S. was outsourced to Latin America. McCarthyism was basically outsourced through propaganda campaigns and then through direct CIA operations like Operation Condor, which aimed at wiping out any socialist sentiment in the continent through torture and death. But it's Boric then siding with the liberals, as social democrats always tend to do, rather than the communists and the socialists against imperialism. So sucks to see. Leo says, oh man, I was clickbaited. I thought this was Mr. Beast's actual video. Then I got here and it was just you guys tricking me. Well, that's good, Leo. You're going to learn more from us than you'd learn from a Mr. Beast video anyways. But really, really appreciate the $5 super chat, brother.
And we'll break down a Mr. Beast video as well. That's I think the first segment that we have. So
yes, Mr. Beast will in fact be watched today. So fear not, comrades. Neoliberal shill says, why do people live in rural if they don't farm? Good question. I don't know. I guess you'd have to ask them. Some people just like living in the country. Actually, I know some people like that. They just don't like the city. It's too cramped for them, and they like space. They like land. They like to do what they want. They like to hunt. I get it. It makes sense. My my last wrestling coach was like that. He doesn't farm, but he has to live in the country. He can't do the city. It makes him anxious.
I have sympathies for that. I grew up in the city and being able to experience somewhat of a rural atmosphere because every place in the Midwest I've lived at has been around the university, so it's the closest to city life that you can get in these small towns. But um, the most fun activities that I end up doing are usually tied to being in rural areas, restaurants, and activities in farmers markets and shit like that. And if I had money, which I don't, severely, I have the opposite of that. I have debt. But if I had money, ideally I would live in the country, maybe do some farming, have some cattle and some livestock, and that sounds fun for me. But I grew up in the city. I know a lot of people that it's the opposite. They grow up in the country, they want to escape to the city. And, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in a rural area. I kind of got the best of both worlds, like rural area, but in town. So a lot of my friends were farmers and people who enjoy country living. I get it. When I was a kid, I kind of rebelled against it because I just thought the Hicks, as they called themselves, I just thought they were stupid and obnoxious. But now I get it. That was part of their culture, or they were just proud of their culture and their background and their parents' job as farmers.
Extremely sweet people, like
Yeah.
super hospitable. Like you can drive for hours in South Florida, and if you wave at people, they won't wave back. But you drive in the Midwest, specifically in the rural areas of the country, and everyone, it doesn't matter who they are, what they're doing, if they're driving, if they're just sitting down in their driveway or something, they're going to do the two fingers and they're going to say hi to you. And that's nice. It's nice. You miss it when you don't have it around you. I definitely do. That's why I like prefer being in the Midwest than anywhere else in the country.
Definitely. Ciao Tinted, thank you so much for the 50 Brazilian reals, I believe that is, which is like 10 American dollars or so. So thank you so much for the big super chat. It seems to me like Americans are patriotic to the point that seeking the emancipation of the working class gets mixed with the anti-communist propaganda spread through the decades. Am I too far off? Solidarity to our North American friends. Yeah, solidarity, comrade. Appreciate you. No, you're not too far off. If you want to explore that concept more, I would recommend Michael Parenti's lecture on patriotism versus super patriotism, where he basically says the ruling class does their best to turn patriotism into this American exceptionalism that says, everything we do around the world is right and just. We're spreading freedom. We're spreading democracy. Patriotism means supporting endless wars abroad, not just not just regular patriotism, but super patriotism. And then Parenti makes the argument that what regular patriotism is wanting your country to actually take care of its people, wanting to take care of the working masses, wanting to invest all the money we're spending on wars abroad here at home. That's what real patriotism is, wanting, something constructive for your country. Versus this super patriotism is just a bourgeois form of patriotism used to manipulate the masses into supporting endless war.
Yeah, we just had coincidentally a similar discussion towards the end of our class. Um, Sam, who's in the chat, brought up a passage from one of the papers that I wrote on imperialism and prophilicity that the class read today. And I mentioned that, in the phenomenon of wokeism, what's packaged is an emancipatory form devoid of any emancipatory content. And Sam and the discussion that we had, he brought up that something similar happens with patriotism, in the form of the flag waving, choreographed patriotism, as Christofferson would say, the super patriotism, as Michael Parenti would say. It's got the form of patriotism, but none of the substance, none of the content. In many ways, it is a form that fights against the content of patriotism. It is antagonistic to real patriotism, which is the only logical conclusion if you love your people, which is the most basic definition of patriotism, is socialism. You can't allow a capitalist class to come in and exploit your population, let alone if it's from an imperial country. So some of the history of the greatest patriots have always ended up uh, at the conclusion of socialism. People like James Connolly, people like Fidel Castro, people like Ho Chi Minh, who said that he got to Marxism Leninism through patriotism. If you love your people, you got to hate the capitalist class, and you got to hate imperialism. That's just the logical conclusion of a genuine patriotism.
Absolutely. And that couldn't be more obvious right now in America when we have these psychotic neocons pushing our country closer and closer towards World War III with Russia and spending more and more money on Ukraine, spending more and more money on wars abroad and destabilizing other countries abroad while people suffer at home, while our conditions deteriorate at home, while our infrastructure gets worse, while all these trains are derailing, right? Um, every dollar that they're spending on imperialism is money that can't be spent here at home on the American people, which coincidentally I'm basically wearing an American flag today. Shout out to the guy who makes all these goofy wrestling shirts that I'm always wearing. But yeah, and that's why you have people like Scott Ritter and General what's the guy's name, or no, Colonel McGregor, these former like military guys or former UN guys who are now speaking out about the war between Russia and Ukraine, because they see that the statecraft of the Biden administration is suicidal. They're pushing the U.S. off a ledge. They're pushing us closer to World War III with Russia, and it doesn't serve anybody except for the military industrial complex, the Democratic Party elites, and a few multinational shareholders and bankers. I guess the BlackRock investors who have now pillaged the Ukrainian economy, and all the military contractors who create the cluster bombs and depleted uranium that we're shipping over there for them. So now you have these patriotic Americans who are against the Biden administration and are coming to an anti-imperialist position because of that. Scott Ritter said recently, like, he never thought he would ally with communists, but now he realizes, like, the communists are his closest allies because they want the same thing. They want an end to this horrific and nonsensical and self-destructive war.
Yeah, and now they're ramping up the depleted uranium ammunitions that they're sending to Ukraine. And one of the analysts that I read, they mentioned that comparison between the regular ammunition to the depleted uranium one is basically like comparing a seasonal cold to a full-fledged epidemic. The effects that it's going to have, the lingering effects it's going to have on populations is just horrific. There's a comment here that I wanted to address. It says all socialism is international. I don't want to imply that this is like someone saying it in an antagonistic form to our statements about patriotism. But yeah, I mean, all socialism is international. And people who get to socialism through patriotism, they don't hate the rest of the world. On the contrary, they see the struggle of their people is intimately tied to the struggle of working class people across the world. And if you think again of these figures, Ho Chi Minh, Fidel, James Conner, do you think that they only cared about their people? No, of course not. They saw that the struggle of their people is tied to the struggle of the masses the world over, and that they can't really win if our brothers and sisters from our class and from the working masses abroad win. If they fail, we can't really win. Yeah, it's an international struggle, and that's why these anti-neocolonial coups that are going on in Africa, it's not divorced from the struggle we have here in the U.S. We're not just looking at it because we like commenting on Africa to look cool or something. These are our struggles. I'm genuinely happy when I see these coups. Not from some bullshit altruistic thing, but because we're in the same fight. I know what the people in Niger are fighting against. I know what the people in Burkina Faso are fighting against. They're fighting against the same monsters that keep us poor and immiserated here at home. It's the same fight. And yeah, I have a love for the American people. I also have a love for the Cuban people. That's my other homeland. But I also have a tremendous love for people from other lands, because I see that our struggles are the same. That's what unites the working class internationally. We have the same fight against a internationally organized finance capitalist class.
Absolutely. I see a pretty well thought out and interesting comment here from someone who seems to be new to our streams. Mr. Beast as a solution to capitalism is an interesting take I have not heard until stumbling into this stream. I don't say this to sound dismissive, and I hope I don't come off that way. I will say I find Mr. Beast's sustainable charity approach to providing medical care to many is a preferable approach to government health care. Is that sort of what you are getting at with this premise, or am I in a different position? Actually, I would say we're probably getting at the exact opposite with this premise, that Mr. Beast just giving money to people who can't afford healthcare is not a solution to the systemic problems that create a situation where so many people in America don't have healthcare. Right? 40,000 people in this country die every single year because they don't have access to basic health insurance. So Mr. Beast doing a few giveaways and handing people money isn't going to fix that systemic problem. It's an individualistic solution to a systemic problem. What actually needs to be done is our healthcare system needs to be transformed so we can provide universal healthcare the way every other developed country in the world does. And a step towards that would be a policy like Medicare for all, taking the government and using it to nationalize the insurance companies, because that's a transformation of the system. Now, I think that's a half measure. I think that's just a very small step in the right direction. What we need is full nationalization of the pharmaceutical companies and other companies as part of a transition to an entirely different economic system, as part of a transition out of capitalism. But the point we're making with Mr. Beast is that charity just puts a band-aid on all of the gaping wounds of capitalism. So our system, our social system, our economic system, capitalism, leaves so many people without healthcare, without food, without access to homes. And charity is aimed at fixing these things, but it never does. There's always homeless people. There's always people dying because they don't have health care, because these problems are systemic. They're baked into our social system. They're baked into capitalism. So the philanthropy of capitalists will never be able to fix the system itself. We can jump into the Mr. Beast video after we answer these super chats, but
there was a famous priest who once said that when I give charity to the poor and help the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask, why is there poverty? They call me a communist. And in many ways, those are the questions that communists do ask and that they also answer. And the issue at play here is, if you're downstream and there's a river flowing down and you keep having to take children off of the river, and you're doing it one by one and at a pace where you can't save all of the children, at some point, if you're smart, you're not just going to say the solution to this problem is us individually just taking the kids out of the river, is going upstream and saying, why the hell are there kids being tossed into this river and drowning, and forcing some people at the end of the stream to pick them out? You're going to get at the root of the problem. And you don't want to condemn Mr. Beast. Probably has a good heart. He's someone that, as a capitalist, has a hell of a lot of a better heart than this other guy that we're going to watch that says that workers have gotten too arrogant, or he's someone who is in some ways helping individual people's lives, but he's not the solution to a systemic problem, as Eddie correctly said. And that's what we need to bring an understanding of. And I'm sure if Mr. Beast is someone who is genuine about the help that he brings to people, and not just doing it for the views and the money, and maybe he is, I don't know his work too well, he has to recognize that it doesn't matter how much he helps and how much of his other rich friends help, it's not going to fix the problem. You got to address the thing that makes it so that you even can have charity in the first place. You didn't have this form of charity in the Soviet Union. You don't have it in China. You don't have it in Cuba. You don't have it in socialist countries, because the conditions that lead to you needing charity are destroyed. And as to the question of the government, because I'm guessing this isn't one of our usual viewers, part of what we're embarking on is not just more government or government do healthcare now. It's a process of rethinking what the state should look like, and realizing that this term that we use of the state or of the government is quite abstract. This feudal states and feudal governments look different from the states and governments that you saw in the slave democracies in ancient Greece. And they both look different from the early capitalist states, and the early capitalist states look different from the states that we have now. States are always apparatuses that are used by the dominant class in a historically constituted period of human life. And the state in our society is one that is ran basically as a committee for the richest people in the country, the people that own everything, that are in the pockets of the politicians, and that have their class interests structure what the government and the state does. And the idea that Marxists bring to the table is not just government do more stuff, is let's not have a government that is of, by, and for the people who own these great monopolies, and keep us poor, immiserated, and oppressed. Let's have a government that's genuinely of, by, and for the people, a government of working people, the people that produce, not the parasitic leeches who get all of the value that we produce and suck us dry and keep us in poverty. Let's have a government of the people that actually produce society and have that government actually serve the interests of society and not the profits of a small group of people.
Absolutely. Americans have been so propagandized against communism. Are the tides turning, or does the mass media still have a stranglehold on the message? Well, the mass media still has a stranglehold on the message, but the times are turning. Among young people in this country, socialism is now a more popular word than capitalism. Right, the anti-communist Red Scare propaganda that the Boomer generation was beat over the head with, isn't hasn't had the same effect on our generation. Communism is viewed more positively. That being said, there's still tons of ideological struggle going on, and there's the ruling class has taken more and more and more and more steps to censor the internet as well, to increase the stranglehold that they have on the message and that they have on the flow of information. Perfect example of that is 7 of our TikTok accounts getting banned as NATO operatives, national security agents, and other arms of imperialism take over the app, or the Biden administration or people from Biden's campaign or from the FBI telling Facebook what they are and aren't allowed to have published on their platform. Right, they're constantly moving towards more and more censorship and more control of the message. But the problem is that the truth is on our side, right? We are just trying to educate people about reality and the reality of the class struggle, whereas the capitalists and the imperialists have to lie. They have to dumb people down. They have to miseducate people. They have to control the narrative and make it seem like something it's not. So, our great advantage is that the truth is on our side and that people aren't stupid. There's only so many smoke screens you can throw up to distract them and trick them. And that's what's happening now as young people are growing up and seeing that the capitalist system has abandoned them and abandoned their parents, and that the social system doesn't work for the working masses. It works to accumulate capital for the capitalist class. People can no longer be lied to that socialism and communism are evil and they're ridiculous ideas, and you just have to shut up and work and accept that capitalism is the best system. People aren't buying that anymore. People are looking and saying there's more empty homes than there are homeless people. Right? You can't tell me that this is the only system that makes sense. Put the homeless people in the empty homes. But we can't do that because we have to protect the profits of landlords. And people aren't buying that anymore, that this is the only way we can do things. Humans are very intelligent, and we can obviously plan and carry out a better economic system than this that leads to more flourishing. But yeah, the struggle continues, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, and it's the objective conditions that are leading people to see through a lot of the anti-communist propaganda that still pervades our culture. I bring this example up often as someone who grew up in South Florida, um, and it's in many ways the hub of anti-communism, anti-Cuba sentiment. The young people are not rocking with that narrative anymore. Many of them perhaps do not accept communism or consider themselves still anti-communist, but they sure as shit don't appreciate what we have now, and that is the foundation for that transformation in consciousness. The fact that young people are looking at a futureless future, a future that's deeply indebted, and where statistically you're going to be the first generation in American history to have lives that are worse than your parents. So these realities themselves are what create the conditions for people to change their mind, and for slowly the propaganda coming from our ruling class to be less and less effective.
For sure, for sure. We're all products of our material conditions. Even Midwestern Marx's existence is a product of material conditions. And the fact that I watched the government screw over my parents as a kid, or Carlos's mom couldn't get health care when he was growing up. These are products of our system that led to a Marxist organization coming about that's educated a lot of new people and recruited a lot of new people to the struggle for socialism. So as capitalism continues to deteriorate and as imperialism continues to decay, as Lenin would say, you're going to get more people who see socialism as an alternative to capitalism. So thank you so much for the fine art revolution. Says you're also cool though, Carlos. They probably said that I'm the coolest before that, and then said Carlos is also cool. But thank you so much for. I think you have to subscribe to get these little pictures of my face here. So thank you very much for that.
By the way, that person that had the pictures, God, I sound like a grandpa. How can anyone call me cool when I don't know what half
They're
of the shit they're doing?
emotes, you nerd.
Yeah, yeah. But I have the soul of a 74-year-old that's trapped in my mid 20s body. But they were asking questions concerning profit motive in healthcare, and maybe now it's not the best time, but I'd say look at Eddie's articles. Eddie's someone who basically has their master's in healthcare management. He's understood the system as in all of its complexities, and he's demonstrated in scholarly professional work how absurd the profit motive is within the healthcare industry. He's provided a historical unfolding of some of the central evils of our for-profit healthcare system and compared it to other societies. So we have some of his articles on the Institute website. You can find that at midwesternmarks.com. We have a search bar that you could search up Edward Liger Smith, and you can find his articles specifically on how the for-profit healthcare system has affected rural American communities and how hospitals have fled because it's just not profitable. And then you should also check out the Journal of American Socialist Studies. It's our scholarly journal that we publish once a year. The one that we did for last year, he provided a comprehensive analysis of our healthcare system and showed why systematically it is just an utter failure, destined to only serve the profits of a small group of insurance companies and multinationals and groups like Vanguard um, and BlackRock and all these major investment firms, and not the interests of the American people. So if your concern is with the American people, there's no way in hell a for-profit model um, should be the go-to. The for-profit model only serves those few at the top who have no form of connection with regular working people like us.
Absolutely. And my interest in healthcare, too, is a product of material conditions, is a product of long term health issues that I dealt with as a kid. And, my critiques of the healthcare system go beyond just the insurance industry. Yeah, the insurance industry is the worst part because it's a mafia style middleman that has nothing to do with healthcare that basically just robs you. But when I was a kid growing up with this long-term health issues, what always helped were like changing my diet, right? Or changing my routine or even changing thought patterns that I had to try and be more positive and things like that. And all that kind of stuff was the stuff the insurance wouldn't pay for. The only kind of thing that the insurance would pay for is drugs, is pharmaceuticals, which in my case with the long-term health issues that I had, it's been shown that antibiotics aren't the best way to treat it long-term. There are all these alternative things that you can do. Not to say I'm against modern medicine. I'm definitely not. But doctors aren't allowed to talk about nutrition. They're not allowed to talk about exercise or they go straight to the pills, and that's how the system's set up. So that's what I saw growing up, and now I've been able to give a lot more systematic analysis of that and realize that the whole system's commodified. They're not giving you healthcare. They're not distributing or administering healthcare to try and make the population as healthy as possible. They're selling you healthcare to try and make as much money as possible. That's just how the system's set up. Which goes back to the fact that we need systemic change to fix our system. We can't just do it through charity or even just through a policy like Medicare for all. We need to go further than that. We need to go beyond that. So, we've been interacting with all these the chats for a while. I appreciate it. We got a ton of super chats. Thank you everyone for that. But do you want to jump into this Mr. Beast video, Carlos?
Yeah, can I just say something real quick to that
Nope.
person?
Nope. Time's up.
'Cause I feel like we're usually talking with our good comrades, but it's good to see someone who's bringing up these basic questions. I think part of what we have to ask ourselves is who has led us to believe that in some magical form, doing things for the sake of the profit of whoever owns a company or the shareholders of a company somehow ends up having a latent effect that helps everyone. What class of people led us to believe this? How did they get to do that? What institutions do they have to control? They have to control the schools. They have to control the textbooks. They have to control the editorials and the publishing companies and the journals. And they have to control the media. Right? They have to control the social medias. How do they control that? Well, they own. They own that. And they also own these other stuff. And it's the people who benefit from you thinking that somehow when they make profit, you get benefited that led you to believe that that's a reality. Break free from that. Stop letting your thoughts and your ideas be dictated by people who are objectively your enemy. You don't benefit if you're a working class person from your boss getting richer. You don't benefit at all. So push that Stockholm syndrome to the side and realize that we could do this a whole lot better if it's actually us, the people, working people, doing it for ourselves.
Yeah, read Jane Mayer's book Dark Money about how that Ayn Randian ideology has been pumped into the education system and the media by the Koch brothers and by people who have a vested interest, a material interest in you believing that higher profits equal higher standards of living. You know, the higher the boss's profits are, the better life is for everybody in society. That's what Ayn Rand said. That's her philosophy, which is not based in reality. It was based in her being bitter that the Soviet Union took her family's businesses away. And that's the kind of ideology that's been pushed by the Koch brothers and the other ruling class capitalists who, you know, are just sitting on hordes and hordes and hordes of wealth and, you know, are the only people in the world who benefited from, say, the war in Iraq, where they got access to Iraq's oil resources. Whereas, you know, for working people, it caused millions of deaths and was extremely expensive for the American people. And now we have all these veterans who come back to our country with PTSD and they're not taken care of. So it's the worst people in the world who are running our country, and they're lying to you with this anti-communist, pro-capitalist nonsense ideology. Thank you, Chow, for another super chat. Do you believe that people living in suburbs or away from the city center helps to create a more conformed society? I don't know. I haven't thought about that much. I live with a lot, or I mean, I went to college with a lot of suburban Chicago kids, and they're definitely the most conformist. Like, they look like clones, a lot of the frat bros who come out of the Chicago suburbs. They all just wear their hats like this, and they talk the same, and they walk the same, but I don't really know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, you have this idea that the city centers, because of their usual cosmopolitan diversity, tend to not lead to that sort of conformist attitude. And maybe there's something to that, but I don't know. I think that there are ways in which the system has been able to devise how forms of nonconformism are the best forms of conforming to things. And specifically, like if you look at, you know, we talked about this in today's class. If you look at the bourgeois ideology around the identity construction mechanism of authenticity, there's a deep paradox in it because all of society, every Netflix movie, everyone tells you you have to be authentic. You have to create yourself. You have to find your real self. But in the process of doing that, what is less authentic and less original than doing that thing that everyone everywhere in all institutions have been telling you to do? So this is one way in which this pseudo-nonconformism plays an essential function as a form of conformism. And I wonder if part of that uh, heterogeneity that you find in cosmopolitan centers sometimes produces that sort of effect that ultimately leads to a form of homogeneous, a form of homogeneity that's mediated through heterogeneity, if that makes sense.
No. So moving on. Just kidding. No, I get it. That was good. Yeah. So moving on to our main event here, we wanted to talk about Mr. Beast and his charitable givings and how charity is not the solution to capitalism's problems. Philanthropy or charity is basically a band-aid on the gaping wounds of capitalism. And at this point, capitalists have turned it into a way to get a tax write-off. And if you read my article about Bill Gates controlling agriculture in Africa, he actually has used the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to finance his own agricultural businesses and fertilizer companies in Africa. So it's essentially a scam. He gets people to donate their money to his foundation. Then he uses his foundation to buy his own commodities in Africa and expand his control of African farmland. And there was actually a summit held in Africa saying that all that Bill Gates was doing was poisoning the soil with his fertilizer, and they wanted him out. But you can check out that article if you want. That's on midwesternmarks.com. But either way, charity is a scam in many ways. And I thought this Mr. Beast video was perfect because he calls it a Squid Game in real life, which Squid Game, of course, is a critique of capitalism, a critique of unregulated capitalism that says people would rather enter this game where you have like a 1 in 500 chance of winning. And if you don't win, you die in a horrific way, then go live in capitalism. And the most interesting part of the show Squid Game, spoiler alert, is when they allow people to leave the game. People who entered the game chasing all the money, or people enter the game chasing all the money, and then they watch like 200 people die, and they're like, all right, get me out of here. But then once they see the realities of capitalism, once they realize they can't pay for healthcare, or they're still drowning in debt, or they're still just struggling to get by day, one by one, everyone ends up going back to the Squid Game. They end up going back to this, game where they'd risk their lives for money rather than be out there getting nickeled and dimed day to day by capitalism. So extremely interesting show, and interesting that Mr. Beast decided to replicate that show with this video Squid Game in real life. And I think it'll be perfect for our purposes here today.
Created every.
Sorry, Carlos, go ahead. You had something.
Well, yeah, that the show was created in South Korea, in occupied, colonized Korea, and I think that's important to note in part because the conditions that it is criticizing are not conditions that Korea just spontaneously wanted to develop. In fact, the vast majority of Korean people were with the forces that eventually end up developing into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and which were artificially splintered along the 38th parallel by people who had no idea what Korea was even like. So it's also a product from that Korea that is occupied by U.S. imperialism and that's used as a proxy against the free Democratic People's Republic of Korea, where you don't have the issues that you have in this capitalism, especially how it occurs in imperialized and colonized countries.
They literally split Korea in half on a National Geographic map. Two American higher-ups in the military who had no knowledge of Korean culture or history.
I recreated every single set from Squid Game in real life, and whichever one of these 456 people survives the longest wins 456 grand.
The first game we're going to play is red light, green light, and they have 30 minutes to cross the red line on the other side of the huge room.
So without further ado, green light. Red light.
Oh!
And as you can see, every single player has a device strapped to them that when they're eliminated, it pops. Chris, what have a chance at one?
Red light.
Oh! Oh! No. I know for sure this guy moved. Green light. Red light. Oh, yo, they're dropping. Okay, now some people are getting out.
You got to get a better spot for the next red light, right?
Imagine how much money this costs to put together. It's crazy, this dude's production value at this point.
Well, I'm happy he's not shooting people. That's a step up from Squid Game.
Definitely. Let's skip to the end of this game and see if they get money or if they have to wait to the end.
You're definitely, so many of you just got out.
They gotta run faster.
You gotta sprint. Green light. Green light. I'm not even gonna say red light. I'm not saying red light. Oh, it's too late. Too late.
Look at how excited these people are. I mean, I'm sure they're having fun. But like, they're playing this ridiculous game and they're probably actually hyped, like, this could be my chance. This is my chance to get financial well-being. You know, and this is a whole genre of video now on YouTube, basically making people do ridiculous stuff in order to get financial well-being. And the most exploitative version of this ever was bum fights, where this guy would pay homeless people to like eat frogs or fight each other. You know, he'd pay them like $20. But the point that we're trying to make here is that these are the conditions capitalism creates. It leaves the masses in desperation. It leaves the masses in a situation where they're desperate for money. They'll do essentially anything for money. And I mean, the fact that this kind of content is its own genre shows that, you know, that rich people can make tons of content out of just saying, you know, if you do this, you win a prize, you win a monetary incentive.
Yeah, and I think the archetype of that is a show that won many awards. Oh my God, I'm blanking on the name now. But Walter White, what's the
Breaking
Bad? Yeah, you can't even think about the concept of Breaking Bad in a society like Cuba, because they tell you, well, you have cancer, and then you just go get treatment for free. And not only treatment, Cuba has some of the most advanced cancer treatment in the world, even though it's been under brutal blockades and hybrid warfare for more than 60 years. It's got treatments that could be saving tens of thousands of American lives, but are not, because of the strangling blockade that the U.S. has on Cuba. So a show like Breaking Bad wouldn't make any sense in Cuba. It wouldn't make any sense in any other country that has a socialized healthcare system.
Absolutely. Good point. And when we do this, I don't even mean to dunk on Mr. Beast or, you know, say he's the problem with our system or he's the problem with capitalism. He seems like a nice guy. As Carlos said, he's much nicer than a lot of capitalists. You know, the fact that he's even willing to give away so much of his immense wealth makes him a lot better than these folks like Zuckerberg and Musk and others who are just hoarding the crap out of it. But yeah, still there's systemic things to be analyzed here.
232 of you survived. If you look above your head, you'll see the $456,000 you're competing for. And now let's move on to Honeycomb.
In Honeycomb, everyone gets a needle and a cookie.
Literally holding it above their heads.
Move on to Honeycomb.
In Honeycomb.
Oh, shoot.
Move on to Honeycomb.
In Honeycomb.
You survived. If you look above your head, you'll see the $456,000 you're competing for. And now...
Oh, I missed the pause again. But yeah, it's like a carrot on a stick. Holding it in front of an animal, like, go, get the money. This is your chance to be financially stable and not have to work 60 hours a week to survive and feed your kids.
Let's move on to Honeycomb.
In Honeycomb, everyone gets a needle and a cookie with a different shape on it. And they have 10 minutes to remove the shape from the cookie. But if they break the shape, they're eliminated.
All right, so everybody, I'm going to need you to get into the line in front of one of these question marks.
All right, I'm going to skip towards the last one here.
I'm definitely donating about $10,000 to Team C's, which all of you should.
Right now, I'm gonna probably give most of it to my family, friends.
That money's coming home with me.
let's go. Congratulations on making it to the top 6.
I want to see what they all want to do with the money.
To celebrate, we made you all steak dinners. Now, unlike the show, this isn't a real knife. This is plastic. But you do have steak. Everyone make sure you eat up so you have plenty of energy for this final game.
I'm thinking about winning all of that money right now. I'm gonna probably give most of it to my family, friends.
That money's coming home with me, giving 100K straight to my mama. I'm feeling great. Just blessed to be here. I'm gonna pull through. I'm definitely donating about 10,000 to Team C's, which all of you should if you have the means.
I won't fold under no pressure. I'm not worried about none of these files. Hey.
So what's this we always hear about humans being inherently selfish, though? What's this we always hear from the capitalist ideologues that everybody's just looking out for their own self-interest? Even these people living in a system where most of us are struggling and where, 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and we struggle to meet our basic needs. Even when these people walk into a bunch of money, they say, I'll give it to my family. I'll give it to my friends. I'll give it to my mom. I'll help them meet their basic needs, help them improve their material conditions before I even improve my own, or, I'll bring them up with me, which, I would say more than anything, I mean, it goes both ways. In some ways, humans can be selfish. In some ways, we can have empathy and think collectively. But, it seems that humans are more cooperative and empathetic than they are selfish when given the opportunity to be so, when put in an environment that doesn't incentivize being cutthroat, being individualistic, and stepping on your neighbor the way that capitalism does.
Ain't nobody got nothing on me, so I'm good.
You want to just go settle this with the final game? Let's do it. Yeah, okay. Let's do it. Let's do it. Welcome to the final game of Beast Games. So I think you guys can piece together what we're about to play.
Musical chairs.
Musical chairs, yeah. Let's test my hypothesis. Raise your hand if you know how to play Squid Game. Exactly. That's why we're doing musical chairs instead, because we're not Korean. Start circling. Start the music. Carl, you can stop it whenever you want. Carl, do not look. Chris, don't look. Carl isn't looking, so we can't be biased. All right, let's see what happens. Oh, you got it.
I got more, man.
Yeah, he's way more. I'm sorry about that. Oh, no. Bring the coffin over here. Hop on in the coffin. He has officially been eliminated, and 5 remain. This chair is now gone. Carl, start the music. Let him soak in it. Carl's not looking at them. He has no idea where they are on the chair.
Somebody's going to get $456,000 because you...
I just want to say I would double leg the shit out of someone for $450,000. I would use everything I've ever learned in the sport of wrestling to take this final chair. And then Midwestern Marks would be balling. Our production value would be great. Mr. Beast, send that money this way. I know you're a nice guy. You can't fix capitalism this way. Your videos are cool, but this isn't the solution. We need Marxism. We need a real struggle for socialism. So send some of that money over here. Patreon.com/MidwesternMarks.
Pause the music.
Oh, boy. Oh, this is authenticity. When will he pause it? When's he going to pause it? Yes! 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 Oh my God!
If it makes you feel better,
I mean, the ecstasy shows you exactly what we're talking about. I mean, imagine what you would be thinking if you just stumbled into all that money. I would be thinking, I'm going to be able to pay the next 20 months rent. I'm not going to have to worry about my card getting declined when I buy food for the next year at least. All the anxieties and the stresses that come from living paycheck to paycheck and from not being able to meet your own material needs just washed away in that moment for that person. And then you got sheer disappointment for the other person who apparently still gets $10K for coming in second place. So that's good.
And you can pay off your debts.
Yeah. That's the first thing I do is pay off my student debt.
Oh my God. Yeah.
give you $10,000 for coming in second place.
Oh, you're kidding.
I mean, if you think about it, though, this is the premise for all game shows.
Yeah.
Like, and
Well,
if you don't have a population of wage laborers who are desperate for means of subsistence, who are divorced from the land and the means of production, so they need to sell their labor, the game shows and stuff like this is perfect when you have a class of people like that. You're going to have endless people signing up trying to get quick money. And I mean, that's the same way the lottery works. Everyone knows that you lose money. Everyone knows the casino always wins. yet people gamble and people develop gambling addictions because they want to, that one time where they hit the lottery and they don't have to worry about meeting their material needs for the rest of their lives. Hopefully, a lot of lottery winners end up going broke. But did you have something to say? Sorry.
This isn't the sort of thing that you see in socialist societies. It's just not, and in different contexts, it takes different forms. But like South Korea, how many people do they make their lives so impossible, and by strangling the North, they convince them to flee, and then part of the conditions of them fleeing are condemning the government, lying, and sometimes they get incentivized to go on game shows and tell the most absurd fucking lies that they can tell about the free Korea, and in exchange for that, they get some sort of money. There's been a bunch of people that have regretted it, uh, but you end up getting your me parks through similar forms of lotteries.
Absolutely. Let's just finish this up here.
No. And with that 079, you just won $456,000 and officially won the very first Squid Game in real life ever. Congratulations on winning. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. You have 7 days to win $10,000. And obviously, massive shout out to the creator of Squid Game. We took huge inspiration from
the reason you can do Squid Game in real life is because Squid Game is based on real life. Because it's based on people being completely desperate for money. And this is a more fun version of it. This is harmless. There's nothing wrong with this. But the only reason you're able to do this is, like we said, because the vast majority of society is in the class of wage laborers who are desperate to get what we call the means of subsistence, the food and shelter and things that they need to survive. And the only way they can get that is by selling their labor. Because they don't own the means of production. They don't own the tools that are used to create the means of subsistence. The capitalists own them. So if you don't sell your labor to the capitalists for a wage, you're not going to be able to get the things that you need to survive. So this creates a mass of people, a majority of society that's constantly in desperation, right? And this is even confirmed by modern studies. Like, look at the study showing how many Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Like 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and struggle to put food on the table and meet their basic needs every week, right? That's just the result of a system that leaves the masses in wanting, that divorces the masses from the means of production. And what we're proposing with a socialist system is moving towards collective ownership of those means of production. Right, making it so the workers who actually create society's wealth have a share in the means of production that they use to create that wealth. The workers who use the tools and the raw materials and transform them into houses and food and the things that we need to survive are the ones who own the tools and raw materials. It's a much more sensible way to manage society and to manage production, rather than just having a tiny group of oligarchs who own everything and they get to make every single decision, which is what capitalism is, the most authoritarian, dictatorial system that you could possibly even think of.
And that's how it used to be spoken of, especially in the early days of 19th century American socialism. The idea was that, we evolved at the level of politics away from a feudal aristocracy, but at the level of economics, we sustain an aristocratic structure. And the idea was that to complete the revolution and to complete the original ideals of the country, this early generation of socialists argued, you had to have a democratic revolution within the economy, which is basically a social revolution, a transformation, a radical transformation of society. And you have people up until the middle part of the century, leading American scholars of democracy, like John Dewey, internationally known, perhaps the most famous American philosopher the country has ever produced, someone who's very closely studied in China, China's actually the only language that all of his works have been translated to. Um, but if you look at this American philosopher of democracy, he was a tremendous critic of what we call American democracy. He felt that because what we have in economics is this aristocratic structure, there's no democracy there. Because what we have in education is a form of aristocratic education. We don't have this learning by doing that's much more democratic and participatory. It's just like, you sit down and you listen and you're just passively consuming things for 8 hours, sitting down, not doing anything. And because of all of this influence on politics, politics ends up being, as he argued, just a shadow cast on society by big business. So you have America's philosopher of democracy basically agreeing that America is basically just an oligarchy or an aristocratic form of governance by modern capitalist means. And he would argue in favor of a society that looks a hell of a lot more like China, which, funny enough, the people who uphold him as the main theorists of their form of democracy call China authoritarian, dictatorial, totalitarian, and they call us democratic, free, etc. In reality, if you look beyond just the superficial substance of what's being told, and you ask the question, where are people in power, which is the central question of democracy. It's not a question of elections. In fact, you go back to Aristotle's Politics. The idea of elections was considered aristocratic because only the people with the financial means to have been able to develop better skill sets, better rhetorical devices, were expected to be the ones to win through elections. So there had to be other means of deciding who will democratically lead than just elections. Elections were considered aristocratic, oligarchic. So when we think about democracy, what should come to mind is not elections or ballot boxes. What should come to mind is what the concept means. Demos kratos, common people in power. Is the will of the people being actualized? Are the people in control? Are the people in power? And it is indubitable that that is not the case and has never been the case in the U.S. and has always been the case in all of the countries that the U.S. has called authoritarian, anti-democratic, anti-freedom, totalitarian, or whatever nonsense term it uses, that in using is actually projecting what it is itself actually is. The only freedom we have here, the only democracy is for the capitalist class, and it's the freedom of capital to accumulate, which for working people manifests itself as a tremendous form of anti-freedom, as a form of slavery.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Liberals love to speak of democracy, but a Marxist never forgets to ask democracy for which class? The same thing could be applied to freedom. Freedom and democracy, the things that the ruling class is always talking about, it really means freedom for them to exploit us. Thank you, Chow, for another super chat. Appreciate that. Lots of super chats coming in today. You made 2 Brazilian communists meet in this YouTube live. Thank you. That's freaking awesome. Love to hear it. Love that we have so many international comrades and comrades from different countries tuning in. So cool to see we have people from every part of the globe. And yeah, it's just awesome. And socialism is always going to be internationalist. We're always going to need to be in solidarity with our comrades abroad. And obviously socialism and the struggle for socialism takes a national form in every country, but you have to be both nationally minded and understand your own domestic situation, and internationally minded and always be connected to the global struggle and always be learning from comrades abroad. So pumped that we got a couple Brazilian comrades in here with us today. And congrats on getting Lula elected and getting rid of the arch douchebag Jair Bolsonaro.
And Brazil is in many ways, part of his global vanguard against the dominant imperialist world order that fancies itself as having once or living now in a unipolar world. But the reality is that the world hasn't been unipolar since 1917. There's always been parts of the world living outside of the sphere of influence of empire. And even in the dark ages of the 1990s, after the fall of the glorious Soviet Union. You still have Cuba, you still have the DPRK as the light post of hope for humanity, existing still outside of the global imperialist world. So, but now you have Lula saying at the recent BRICS summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, that we have to reject all forms of neocolonialism, even those that uh, come with the pseudo progressive veneer of environmentalism. We don't want a neocolonialism packaged up as environmentalism. He also stressed the importance of de dollarization and the potential for a long term goal of a new currency, something that functions somewhat like what John Maynard Keynes expected to see following the Second World War, right when the dollar becomes the hegemonic global currency, at least for the imperialist world. Um, and you have Dilma Rousseff heading the New Development Bank, which is going to be one of the most important institutions of the 21st century. She's currently in China. She's 73 years old, and she says she's in great shape. She's been traveling all across China and trying to get to know China as best as possible. They've lifted 36 million people out of poverty, Dilma and Lula in Brazil. But then she looks at how China was able to lift 800 plus million people out of poverty, and she says this is something we all have to come and learn from. And it's the duty of people fighting for a more equitable world, for a world that's more just. It's their duty to study China's success. And that's what she's doing. And, she's made it her priority through the New Development Bank to break through the old forms of financing that you have in the global financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. And they're trading, they're lending without conditionalities, and it's just terrific. So in many ways, Brazil and the key leaders in the Brazilian class struggle are at the forefront of the struggle against imperialism.
Absolutely. I have one question about what you said. I think I know what you mean, but you said there hasn't been a multipolar world since 1917. And not that I want to agree with Reclaim Dasein about anything ever. We tend to just stay in disagreement. I think you were saying there wasn't a socialist pole, right? There wasn't a pole of worker states. It was all a bunch of capitalist countries fighting for the colonies.
You had a form of imperialist multipolarity. But after 1917, the way in which we think about multipolarity changes, and the other pole becomes the socialist countries. And if we consider unipolar to be a world dominated by imperialism, we literally have not had that since 1917. There's always been a pole fighting outside of the sphere of influence of empire.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of the socialist pole that emerged in 2017, our buddy Combate, Uphold Reality, a great Twitter account, tweeted this today, a video about nostalgia for the Soviet Union and the former USSR, which, if you don't know, what we hear from the diaspora and what we hear from Western media is that everybody in Russia and everybody who lived in a previously socialist country knows that socialism doesn't work. And they all hate socialism, and they realize it's nothing but a dictatorship. But actually, 70% of Russians now say that they prefer the Soviet economic model to the neoliberal capitalist model, which was induced on them by the West and by Western multinationals after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They recognized that they had more economic security, their country had more stability, and they preferred the more collectivist culture that existed in the Soviet Union and that was promoted by the party at the time, as compared to the individualistic, cutthroat, consumerist culture of capitalism that was pitched to them. And, it's ironic because when capitalism came to the Soviet Union, you have that famous commercial of Gorbachev stuffing his fat face with Pizza Hut. He's like, look, now we finally get freedom, true freedom. We're going to have Pizza Hut in Russia. That's what freedom means, freedom to consume. But really, after living with capitalism now for 30 some years, the people of Russia realize that capitalism doesn't equal freedom. Sure, you have more consumer options, but you don't have, freedom to do what you want to do with your time, because you have to spend all that time at work. You have to work a certain amount of hours in order to survive. You don't have the freedom that was provided by state-sponsored childcare, which was provided to the people by the socialist system, by the Soviet Union, versus under capitalism. If you can't afford childcare, tough luck. You figure it out. So again, that's led to a ton of nostalgia for the Soviet Union amongst people who lived there in Eastern Europe and in Russia. And this is an example of that with some interviews. Anything to say before we jump in, Carlos?
No, go right ahead.
Конечно, по бесплатным квартирам, по бесплатному образованию.
I'm sorry to stop it already, but this is always something that I find so interesting, because we know the collapse of the Soviet Union was a human rights disaster. It was an economic disaster, right? Even if you're the most staunch anti-communist, you can't deny that. Every standard of living, dropped. Malnutrition increased, poverty increased, homelessness increased, drugs and prostitution flowed over the border for the first time in years, right? So we know that people probably miss the free apartments and the free education and the free daycare and the material things. But what they all say, all these people who are nostalgic for the Soviet Union, they all say they miss the culture and they miss the human connection, the human heartedness of people, right? And they can't stand how capitalism forces us to compete with one another. It forces us to be individualistic. It forces us to be cutthroat. It forces us to be consumeristic, and rather than having this collective spirit or the spirit of, of cooperation that they were trying to foster in the Soviet Union. So I think that's just so interesting that the socialist project was moving towards a new kind of relationship between human beings, where they were more cooperative and more empathetic, and capitalism induces us to be the exact opposite. And then capitalist ideologues say, nope, that's just human nature. That's just how we are. We're selfish. When that selfishness is injected into us every day by our system that tells us, the more selfish you are, the more successful you'll be, and the better off you'll be.
Absolutely. And these numbers that we have now are not even like new in terms of like the amount of people that preferred the Soviet Union. Like the Soviet Union didn't fall democratically. It actually fell in a very undemocratic form. There was a vote in all of the regions of the Soviet Union on the collapse, on whether they wanted to transition to capitalism and away from the socialist project. And it was voted overwhelmingly against that. They wanted to sustain their socialism. Most votes were somewhere from 75 to 85%. So the vast majority of people wanted to continue down the socialist route. They understood there was a lot of contradictions at play internally, a lot of pressure from external influences as well. But the fact that 70% of people prefer the Soviet Union or miss the Soviet Union just speaks to a reality that has always been there. There was a deep transformation of what it meant to be human. And as you mentioned, in many ways, it created the new person that Che hoped for Cuba to create, and that Cuba was also able to create, but that naturally is a product of a society that functions qualitatively different from our capitalist societies.
For sure. This person says they shelled bombed parliament, right? Yeltsin did. His forces shelled the Russian parliament. It was like a coup-esque takeover.
По душевности человека.
Вы знаете, бывает. Октябрята, пионеры, комсомол. Как-то все были заняты, понимаете?
Три народа были вместе, а сейчас мы стали врагами. Но самое главное, жалко очень наших друзей с Украины. То, что мы дружим с Россией.
Coldplay, baby.
I was like, is that part of the video?
Communist Coldplay in the background makes it so much better.
I love it. Hopefully we don't get a copyright strike.
We probably will.
Нужен третий брат.
Самое ностальгическое воспоминание — это то, что я была в 8 пионерских лагерях. Каждое лето по 2 смены, и вот это было круто и в кайф. Сейчас этого нет, сейчас это дорого.
I'm going to stop it every few seconds to try and stop us from getting copyrighted.
Сейчас вот еще попробую это пошли. Вот, пожалуй, с детства это самое крутое, что было.
По людским взаимоотношениям.
Again, I miss the human relationships. Again, they all say that, dude. It's not just the free stuff that they wanted. It was the culture that the Soviet Union was fostering among people.
Были общие застолья, это было обязательно. Приходить, поздравлять. И самое главное — петь. Я скучаю по песням советского периода.
Раньше была уверенность в завтрашнем дне. А сейчас не то, что без забот.
They had confidence in the future, but now they don't. I mean, can relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's why so many American youth are turning towards socialism and away from capitalism. We were saying that earlier. They see their parents living paycheck to paycheck. They see their parents working their whole lives and then not having enough money to retire. They see the ecological devastation that our government and our economic system and economic ruling elites are doing nothing to stop. Just, starting new wars and sabotaging pipelines that lead to ecological devastation, just ignoring the environment in order to keep making profits.
And that don't lead to anything because Europe is buying more LNG, liquefied natural gas, than it ever has from Russia. And in a lot of what it's buying, it's proxied through India, which means that there's a price markup. So we just fucked up Europe basically for no reason. Well, there is a reason. Now we're the primary seller of oil to Europe, but I can't see the Europeans being happy about that for too long.
People were kinder again.
Куда не приезжаешь, что была родина? Ну, допустим, я строил метро, в Армении строили. Вот, сейчас вот когда бы я поехал туда строить? Никогда. Даже когда стояли в очереди за колбасой, то было хорошо. Ее всегда хватало. И всегда знали, что она свежая. Жаль, конечно, что такую страну развалили.
Wait, I thought the bread lines and the food lines in the Soviet Union meant it was a totalitarian dictatorship. But here's this guy saying that he enjoyed standing in line for sausages because people were friendly and people were nice. You had that human connection. That's different than the narrative I've been beat over the head with since 2nd grade.
Каково это было жить в СССР?
Для простого люда неплохо. Хорошо.
Родился в нем, отлично. Да, я закончил образование бесплатное,
This is, by the way, this is what communism with American characteristics looks like. It's like talking about the people with Coldplay in the background. That's what the American character. We're going to force whatever his name is, the guy from Coldplay, to continue putting out bangers once we win.
Exactly. What is it? Chris Martin? I think that's his name. Yes, and when we release Chris Martin, once we release all the nonviolent drug offenders from jail, we'll create sentimental videos with this playing in the background. We'll just make socialism a hype Coldplay video.
Ну, было все доступно. Зарплаты, состояние, эгалите, почти равенство.
Не жилось, шикарно. Я занимался спортом бесплатно.
Oh, man. That one hurts me. That's one of my favorite things about the Soviet Union was they had gyms and sports for people who were part of the unions or, for workers. And it's so... Like in America, I talk about this all the time, but you play sports in high school and college, and for so many people, it's a sense of connection right? It's a sense of purpose. It's a source of community that you always have. You have a built-in friend group if you choose to do a sport in college, when you go to college, because you have your team. And I've seen it time and time again because I'm a college wrestling coach and wrestled in college, so this is my area. When people leave college and when they leave their sports, they have a hard time closing the yearbook because they're sad, because they've lost that sense of purpose, that sense of drive, and most importantly, that sense of community that you get from your teammates, that you get from working together with people towards a common goal every day. And, that's when we talk about how capitalism puts us in a competition with each other. We mean, in terms of fighting for resources and fighting to see who can brown nose the boss the hardest. And then the capitalists themselves are in a competition, right? That's the kind of competition we're against. Sports provide a healthy competition. It provides a way for humans to exercise their competitive nature in a way that doesn't, involve stepping on the throat of someone else in order to get rich. There is a inherent competitiveness in humans, but that's not the only thing that drives humans. But free sports, expanding sports, and offering sports to people past college age, and giving working people enough free time so that they can pursue things outside of the workplace. That gets to me. That's part of the reason I'm part of this struggle for socialism.
Я учился бесплатно. Я лечусь бесплатно. Меня все устраивало. Мне было хорошо.
Даже я сама занималась спортом, я не хочу сказать, что
Again with the sports.
была там великим. Но то, что мне нравилось, я занималась везде, в «Динамо», в трудовых резервах. Все секции, все дети в школу ходили. Школа у нас это дом родной. Вот сейчас я не знаю, конечно, как у всех, но мы, все наши одноклассники, мы встречаемся как одна семья.
Уверена, завтрашний день и славная гордость за жизнь прекрасного страны.
That goes back to what we were talking about with patriotism, right? Socialism allows you to capture a real form of patriotism. What the American ruling class loves is American exceptionalism and super patriotism. This idea that we're the greatest, so we can invade Iraq with no reasoning, and it's all for the benefit of their people. It's for freedom and democracy. It's nonsense. But this is real patriotism, being proud of your country and the way that it takes care of its people. And not just being proud, but having love for the working class, for the your fellow countrymen, for the masses, for the people that you go to work with and that you go to school with and that you play sports with every single day. Having love for them and wanting to take care of them. That's real patriotism. That's why I'm sorry. I know, a lot of people on Twitter love to call us Pat Socks, but, yeah, I do have patriotism. No, I don't, support the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war and all these forms of super patriotism. But I love the working class people in this country. I love the American masses. I don't view them as a bunch of evil imperialist settlers. Yes, some of them have been tricked by bourgeois and imperialist propaganda. That's what we're trying to do here with Midwestern Marx, is work on that. But, everybody or the vast majority of people that you meet day to day are inherently good. And they deserve, to have their material needs met. And if they were given the opportunity to flourish, they really could. But a lot of people are deprived of that under capitalism. And in that sense, I'm patriotic, that I desperately want to help the American people flourish.
And you can't succeed in socialism if you don't love your people. If you have despair for your people, if you look at them condescendingly, you're not going to win them over in the struggle for socialism. And without the people, I don't know what sort of socialism you're going to have. But I can only imagine. I mean, it's easier for me to imagine because I got Cuba as my other homeland that I'm patriotic for. But I mean, just imagine being able to have an anthem and a flag that when it's waved across the world, it gives people hope. And not just symbolizes the bombs that have been dropping on their family members' houses and, the lives that have been destroyed thanks to sanctions and all the things that our empire does. Being able to have that pride in these symbols because they're not being used as the symbols of empire and the symbols of an order that kills millions of people and immiserates billions. That feeling's got to be fucking amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being able to be proud of your country would be amazing.
Технологии убирают, потому что они растут, да, постоянно. Вот, если не считают технологии, ну, наверное, ссылка на все. 145 тысяч долларов. Чем это компенсировано?
Там у вас ушло бы миллион.
So literally they're saying technology is advanced, medical technology is advanced, but now I can't afford it. So what's the point? It's like the American healthcare system, the most expensive healthcare system in the world, the most advanced medical care in the world, but 40,000 people are dying every year because they can't afford it. It's like, what's the point of all these technological advances? What's the point of having Pizza Hut in our country if no one can afford to eat?
And in terms of spending, we're spending. It's the same thing with the military. With healthcare, we're spending more than 10 times more than the next 10 countries. Not more than 10, more than the next 10 countries combined. But our results in terms of efficiency are nowhere near the top. That means we're spending so much, and our results are like very, very mediocre. It's not an efficient system. It only works for, the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and it doesn't work for the people.
Facts.
Ну, конечно, лучше что. Город растет, города растут. Но плохо не растет. И все тоже должны учиться. Это не у всех же родителей деньги там мешками миллионов ставят, правильно?
It's so interesting that we now have them as an example of what it's like when people have socialism and then they are induced with this neoliberal shock therapy where they move towards, closer towards capitalism. I wouldn't say that capitalism has been fully restored in Russia. Like, there's lingering effects of the Soviet Union. What Putin did was nationalizing a lot of major industries, literally just the government seizing major industries and sources of productive power from the capitalists and reinvesting them in the Russian people. Like, that's something that could never happen in a neoliberal capitalist country like the US, right? So there are parts of their economy that are socialistic, and the closer Russia moves towards China and the more they combat the US, the more they'll have to reconcile with their socialist history. But it's such an interesting case study that we have all these people who lived in previously socialist countries who then, saw what capitalism was like, and a lot of them were lied to by the propagandists at the time who said capitalism's better, capitalism's freedom, and they hadn't known anything else besides socialism. Then they got a taste of capitalism and they're like, fuck this.
Yeah, and it's not without reason that the official opposition party in Russia is the Communist Party, and they say that they get cheated in the elections, but they're definitely winning the hearts and minds of the Russian people, and in many ways actually influencing Putin and United Russia towards taking positions that are objectively more in line with socialism than with the dominant imperialist world order. And I hate to say it, but in many ways, Russia is acting at the international scale a lot more like a great power socialist country would than China. I love China. I think it's the beacon of hope. But it just recently abstained from a call to sanction Mali. Russia voted against it. It was Russia who vetoed that call to sanction Mali. And in many other instances, Russia is much more willing to take the lead in directly challenging empire. whereas China, for reasons which are maybe understandable, is not.
Yeah, and they're playing the long game. Like it's hard if
Yeah.
you do a direct comparison. I did this on my Twitter the other day after Carlos and I had this conversation about China versus Russian foreign policy and how Russia is basically acting like a great socialist power on the global stage at this point. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, China did lead up the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS. They're leading up all these things that are bringing countries together against the U.S., and including Russia, and allowing a multipolar world to come about. But Russia is a huge part of that, right? They're a huge part of this move towards multipolarity and away from the U.S. And then when it comes to like the conflict in Syria or what's going on in Ukraine, Russia's not afraid of confronting the U.S. directly the way that China is. So China's leading up all these long game tactics, while Russia's kind of taking on the U.S. head on, face to face, which is what the Ukraine war is, a conflict between Russia and the imperialist West and NATO. And Syria was a similar thing. Like Russia sent troops in, and China would never, ever do this. They sent troops in to help Bashar al-Assad, the democratically elected leader of Syria, stabilize the country against the coalition of extremist terrorist groups who the U.S. was backing. And yeah, Syria was devastated by the civil war, and the U.S. is still occupying the oil fields, which I'm sure is just a coincidence. But they're in a much, much, much better place compared to Libya, where the U.S. was able to topple the government, and now you still got warlords fighting in the power vacuum that was created. And, that's thanks to Russia. So in a lot of cases, their foreign policy is, even superior to China's. So it's hard to make a direct comparison between the two, but. And it's 40% of their economy still under state control. So,
yeah, and well, even in Africa, that follows. Like China's helping through the Belt and Road Initiative to develop infrastructure and to do all these great things. But Russia is much more open to helping militarily develop the defense systems of the countries specifically that have been able to push out the neocolonial regimes, French and American in character. So yeah, they each play different roles, but conjoined and in many ways equally important roles in challenging imperialism. But yeah, it's I understand China's long game, but I wish they were more proactive in their solidarity with fellow socialist countries and countries under the boot of imperialism. And it's not to say that they're not, and that they haven't gotten a whole lot better with Xi in this area, but the Soviet Union would have been different.
I thought about making a video once because obviously China has this, complete policy of non-interventionism, and we'll trade with anyone as long as it brings about mutual development or mutual benefit. I almost made a video saying, well, sure, but don't trade with Israel. Make an exception for Israel. Come on, China. Stand with the Palestinians. But before I made that video, I asked some Palestinian comrades, is this what you guys want? And they're like, nah. They're like, we stand with China. China stands with us globally far more than the U.S. We love our comrades in China. We know they have our backs. We know what they're doing with their foreign policy. So I didn't make the video. And that shows kind of the perspective of global communists, even Palestinian communists directly under the boot of capitalist imperialism understand China's foreign policy and what they're doing. Meanwhile, you have these Western leftists in the U.S. and the imperial core like condemning China as authoritarian and imperialist. It's like, dude, have some conversations with your comrades who are actually under the boot of imperialism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do we have any?
Huh? I know you're really tired, Carlos. You just taught a whole class before this. I really wanted to get into 9/11 today. I'll do a power hour tomorrow, and I'll do 9/11, and hopefully Carlos can join. But that's going to be really interesting, and we're going to get in depth, and it's going to be something you're not supposed to talk about. So that's always fun. But yeah, did you want to do the Tim Gurner evil CEO segment today, Carlos, or are you ready to to wrap up?
Well, let's try to do it. It's a short one. It's a minute. I've just been up since 8 working, and I kind of, the only break I got was the 1.5 hour workout I was able to get in. It was a glorious chest day, but that's
I hit chest today too. What a coincidence!
Oh, there you go. All right, yeah, let's get into it, and then we can head out.
All right, yeah, this is a short one. That's why I ask. Again, we'll cover our longer segments tomorrow. I'll talk about the difference between inventing reality by Parenti and manufacturing consent by Chomsky, and then 9/11 and Tower 7 stuff. But what we're about to look at now is a video of Tim Gurner, a founder and CEO of the Gurner Group, which is probably just some investment group, a group of rich people who own shares in companies, so they're able to make money and accumulate wealth off of working people's labor. And Tim had some very interesting comments to make about the state of the economy and what needs to be done about it. So thank you so much, Popers, for the super sticker. Appreciate you, comrade. Constant viewer of Midwestern Marks member. Thank you so much, Popers. You're the man.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years. And we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50%, in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going on. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
I mean, if this guy wants productivity to increase so bad, he should quit his Wall Street job and get an actual job. Go work in the factories. Go work in the fields, Tim. If you need productivity to increase, why don't you actually do something with your labor to help increase productivity? But no, of course, he just wants to start whipping the workers. He wants to inject pain in the economy so they work harder, because all the systemic problems with capitalism, inflation and things like that, it's all the workers' fault. It's not because of the contradictions of the capitalist system and the way that it's inherently crisis-ridden. It's just because the workers are lazy and they don't want to work hard enough. It's not because of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall that Marx analyzed 150 years ago, that rates of profit are going down. It's because the workers are lazy. We just need to start whipping them and inject pain into the economy until they work harder for us and our profits go up. Ain't that right, Tim?
I love this. This is a treat. We should have all capitalists say this, because this shows, this confirms that these are the motives of the capitalists. They've always had to gloss over their motives and make this bullshit ideological twist that somehow their profits lead to the well-being and the common good and all of this shit, because that's how you get consent. Like, no order can survive just off of coercion. None. Like, every order needs some level of consent in order to survive. And you need capitalists to lie about their intents, about their interests. You need them to convince people whose interests are not aligned with their class interest that their interest actually is. When they speak like that, they can't do that. So this is a treat. This is a treat. This is a capitalist admitting to the people that they are scumbags. But it's not just them. It's not them as individuals. They're, as Marx would say, the personification of capital. If it wasn't them, it'd be someone else doing it. The system needs a select few amount of people to do this. And so we shouldn't personalize it. even though it'd be great to have this man in a gulag. So we shouldn't personalize it, but realize that he's just saying what the system demands of people like him. That's it. And when they do these things, and this is, in a way, this is why Empire hated Trump. He was the guy that maybe because of incompetence or whatever other reason took the mask off. The mask is fundamental for Empire. That mask that just prevents us from seeing what's actually going on is how consent is derived. And Trump would go out and talk about how he wanted Venezuela's oil. You can't do that. Bush had to lie about WMDs, and all these people had to lie about different fucking reasons to obscure the actual reason why they were doing things. And Trump was just saying, damn it, when I was there, we almost had Venezuela's oil, and now look at them. Now they're stabilizing again. It's like, what the fuck? Empire's like, what are you doing? You're pulling the mask down. You're going to let them see us. And this is what this guy's doing. He's, as someone said in the comments, he's taking the mask off, and he's saying the quiet, hidden part out loud.
He's almost giving expression to Marxist analysis. Like, what does Marx call the unemployed or unemployment? He calls it the reserve army of labor, which is necessary for capitalism to function. Marx says this. Capitalism creates an army of people who aren't employed but are ready to step in if the capitalist, say, fires a worker for not working hard enough. So it gives them this constant pool of workers that they can draw from, and they can constantly threaten to replace their existing workforce. So that's what this guy's saying we need more of. We need to increase the reserve army of labor so we can, increase what Marx would call labor intensity. We can increase productivity by making the workers work harder under threat of being replaced, because they're slacking off. They're thinking about their family too much on the job, or they're playing fantasy football or doing something that they actually enjoy instead of being laser focused on making me profit, which is all that these parasites, these bloodsuckers like this guy want. Coincidentally, he looks like a real vampire. Like, this guy could have been in the Twilight movies for sure. They wouldn't have even had to put any makeup on him.
What he's saying there to working families is that his class needs them to be even more precarious, even more desperate, even more lifeless, because it's no life when you're just laboring in a meaningless, alienated job for 10 to 12 hours a day in order to relax, and then you spend the rest of your waking hours feeling the burden of that work. What he's saying to those families is that in order for his profits and the profits of his buddies to continue where they're at and to continue accumulating, he needs working people to be in that level of desperation. And I don't think working people are done. I think they've been lied to. Oftentimes they've accepted it. Other times they've just resigned because they understand what fighting back entails, getting fired, etc., getting persecuted. But working people are not them. And when idiots like this go viral saying the quiet part out loud, it gets the wheels moving. And a lot of people who are looking for answers to why it is that their lives are getting harder, even though they're working either the same or more than they did before. And that's the answer right there. That's the answer. You have a system that needs people like that to exist, and that their existence is premised on yours being as immiserated as it is. So
that's
I want 10 more of these.
Sorry, what's that?
I want 10 more of these. We should get comrades to infiltrate these billionaires, get them high, and then record them saying shit like this. If we get drunk. 2 of these a month, we'll have a revolution in a year.
Yes, let's get them drunk. I mean, that's what I said on Twitter. Like, this guy's going to spark a revolution and make himself target numero uno of the discontented masses. What you said is so perfect. His existence as a wealthy person is dependent upon exploiting you and making your life as miserable as he possibly can, injecting pain into the economy. That's exactly what it is. And he's just expressing what he knows to be the reality because he thought he was safe talking to Financial Review at the Property Summit. I mean, that's the most bourgeois sounding meeting you could ever have, the Property Summit held by Financial Review. But somebody filmed it and it got out, and regular people were able to see it. And I mean, this is how all capitalists feel, and this is how all capitalists are. Their existence, their place on top of society as a capitalist is dependent on your misery and on your exploitation. Not all of them say it. Some of them are better liars than Tim. They don't say the quiet part out loud, but that's the reality of it. And that's what we mean when we say the truth is on our side, right? All we're trying to do is point out the reality of the situation and the reality of the economic system to people so they can struggle against it. The capitalists are dependent on lying to you, except for every once in a while they mess up and they forget to tell their lies. It's something I wanted to bring up, but I can't find it. Do you have anything else on this guy, Carlos?
No, that's it, man. I'm very happy to see it go viral.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's awesome. Does anyone know if I reprint my published works? So my published works are available on midwesternmarks.com. They're not like we have our printing press, but all of the stuff we've printed is also available on midwesternmarks.com in the store section. So anything I've written for the Journal of American Socialist Studies 1 or 2 are on there. I haven't published any books yet, working on one, and then all of my articles are on midwesternmarks.com. You can just go to midwesternmarks.com, click the search bar, and then search Eddie Liger, and they'll all pop up there. Got articles about Bill Gates's agricultural efforts in Africa, articles about the American healthcare system specifically in rural areas, and that's a comparative analysis to the healthcare system in rural Cuba and rural Venezuela. So lots of stuff like that. We've got some older works too, that maybe I should go back and edit or critique myself. But and same for Carlos. Carlos says are all on there as well.
As are thousands of others, because we publish, around 50 to 100 articles a month. And we've been doing that for more than 3 years. So there's a whole lot of treasures in that website. So make sure to check out midwesternmarks.com. Keep up with the articles. We publish a lot of original material, and we scourge some of the most important anti-imperialist socialist websites for republishing good articles on news subjects and on theory and other good stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cade Grenade, for becoming a 5-month member. The FedEx proletariat. Appreciate that, Cade. And appreciate everybody's support. Appreciate all the YouTube members, all the Patreon supporters at patreon.com/MidwesternMarks, which is the way to fund us without YouTube taking a cut. But of course, we appreciate our super chatters, people who donate directly to the PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee account. And then anyone who just likes the streams, participates in the streams, and participates and is a part of this community. Appreciate you all. Thank you to our moderators today, Cobra Commander and Ware Pilgrim. Really appreciate you guys for doing that. Anything else you got to say, Carlos, before we call it a stream?
It seems like big news from Sean Fain, UAW president, concerning the potential strike. I actually was able to read right before I came to stream that maybe tomorrow they're going to announce where they're going to start striking. But we should get in contact with the Institute's labor guy, Kyle Pettis, to talk to him about what's going on in UAW, any updates in the labor movement. So look out for that. Hopefully we'll try to get him on as soon as we can. And if you want to support us financially while also getting something in return, make sure to check out the Midwestern Marks store on the website. There you can also find Midwestern Marks gear, clothes, shirts, pants, track suits, Midwestern Marks tracksuits, Midwestern Marks mugs, bandanas for your dogs, flags. But you'll also find, if you click on the books section, all of our published books and our print journals. So do make sure to check those out. We recently published a book from Dr. Thomas Riggins called The Outcome of Classical German Philosophy, a great book going over some of the central influences behind Marxist philosophy. Midwestern Marx prices, $12 for the print copy, $5 for the ebook. So make sure to check that out. Check it out and keep the movement growing. We're nothing if it's not for our audience and the role that you all play in getting the word out. And this is a fight that we're all in together for a better world. So thank you so much for watching. Share with a friend, share with a coworker. Get involved in the fight for socialism and for a better world. Let's overthrow these parasites that are leading us to nuclear Armageddon and fight for a world and where we're in control and not them.
Hell yeah, brother. That's pretty inspiring. All right. I think that's a great way to end it. Thank you all for hanging out with us today. Hope you learned something. Solidarity. We'll see you on the next one.
injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic